Washington Chinese TV, I'm Leo.
Washington Chinese TV, I'm Chen. We are happy we are go up or at 8 we the world. We are remembering history to cherish peace.
5,000 years of Chinese civilization. Today, let us turn back to modern Chinese history and look at China's great power 100 years ago. Let us reverse the source of time to 1840, 181 years ago.
The Opium War of 1840 was the end of the golden age of the Chinese Empire and the beginning of a century of humiliation by the Western powers to China. The end of the war was the signing of the Xianzhou Treaty, one of which was that the Qing dynasty would pay a total of 980 million taels of silver to the 8 foreign countries. The Xianzhou Treaty is considered to be the most serious unequal treaty in Chinese modern history, and it is regarded as a semi-colonial and semi-feudal society.
The once glorious feudal empire with countless treasures.
Located in Beijing, China, the Imperial Garden Yuanminjiwan of the Qing dynasty is magnificent in scale, and is one of the masterpieces in the history of Chinese architecture. After several foreign looting and destruction during the Cultural Revolution, he was completely unrecognizable, only taking advantage of a few white bones, but he can still see his nobleness.
According to some data, there's been a total of 1.6 million cultural relics have been lost from China to 47 museums in the United Kingdom, United States, France, and other countries. The ancient country, riddled with holes, calls for those responsible for historical missions.
The revolution of 1911 led by Sun Yat-sen overthrew the autocratic monarchy that ruled China for thousands of years, but failed to fundamentally change the nature of China's semi-colonial and semi-feudal society, the new social forces that China expected, and opened up a new path to save the country and the people. The New Youth magazine, founded by Chen Duxiu in 1915, gave rise to a trend of emancipating the mind from a new culture in Chinese society. On May 4, 1919, due to China's diplomatic failure at the Paris Conference, students from Beijing gathered to demonstrate in front of Tiananmen Square. Its patriotic movement, Shanghai Workers, went on strike in support of the students. Subsequently, workers went on strike and merchants went on strike, which quickly expanded to the masses and expanded to 20. In more than 100 cities in multiple provinces, the Chinese working class began to enter the political arena with an independent attitude.
in my full moment, someday, an ideal change. I wake the countless young people. I need also awake the ill.
The passion that ignited the May 4th movement 100 years ago, the hurricane-like shouts have long since dissipated, but the May 4th spirit has always been immersed in the blood of this nation.
The Communist Party indeed are many countries in the world. What are the elements of the Communist Party of China?
After 100 years of the Communist Party of China, it has opened up a new realm of innovation and development of Marxism China's practice. The Communist Party, Mao Zedong, thought has magnified the pattern, serve the people, and seek happiness for the people, and finally realizes the lofty goals of communism.
In 1920, under the influence of the October Revolution of the former Soviet Union, Qin Duxiu and Li Dazhou in the north and south of China met to plan the establishment of the early Communist Party group. There were 8 early organizations at home and abroad, with a total of more than 50. The first National Congress was completed in July 1921, and the convening of the One Great Congress announced the official establishment of the Communist Party of China. July 1st of each year is set as the anniversary of the birth of the Communist Party of China. Since then, people's desires have begun, and unprecedented ideological changes and superpowers of action have taken place. The Communist Party of China has only 53 members since its establishment, and now it has more than 95 million members, making it the largest political party in the world. China is a multi-party country, and the relationship between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party refers to the relationship between the Chinese Kuomintang and the Communist Party of China. On July 7, 1937, the Japanese invaders brazenly launched the Lugo Bridge incident. Soon, North China fell. China and Japan went into full-scale war, and the KMT and the Communist Party cooperated for the second time to jointly resist Japan. The beginning and end of the civil war between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party. The Kuomintang Communist Civil War, also known as the Kuomintang Communist War, is a war between the Chinese Kuomintang and the Chinese Communist Party, and their armed forces for national power. The Kuomintang Communist Civil War was roughly divided into 2 phases. The first phase of the Kuomintang Communist Civil War from 1927 to 1937, and the second phase of the Kuomintang Communist Civil War from June 1946 to September 1949. The Kuomintang and the Communist Party broke in April 1927.
Who ignited the spark of fire in Jinggangshan?
In October 1927, the Communist Party went to the countryside after the defeat of the Kuomintang in Hunan, restored and established the Communist Party organization, and established the revolutionary regime. Mao Zedong established the first rural revolutionary base in Jinggang, deep in the forest in southeastern China. In the September 18 incident in Shenyang, China, in 1931, Japan launched a war of aggression against China, occupying the entire northeastern region of China within 100 days. The Red Army's 25,000-mile-long march was a journey in which on average one Red Army died every 300 meters. In the Battle of Xiangjiang, forcing the Dada River, flying over the Luting Bridge, climbing snow-capped mountains, crossing the grassland, gnawing bark, eating wild vegetables, paved with blood for 25,000 miles, left countless touching stories. On July 7, 1937, the Japanese invaders brazenly launched the Lugo Bridge incident. Soon, North China fell. China and Japan went to war. On December 13, 1937, the defense of Nanjing was lost, and the Japanese army led the Nanjing Massacre. According to the statistics of the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, about 300,000 people were killed when the Japanese army invaded Nanjing. This is the cruelest page in Chinese history since it fell into modern times.
In the once shattered Chinese society, who is fighting for the support of hundreds of millions of Chinese people and uniting the Chinese people together?
In May 1938, Mao Zedong's On Protracted Warfare was one of Mao Zedong's masterpieces of military thought. On Protracted Warfare analyzed and studied war and military issues, and occupies a unique position in the history of military thought in the world. Mao Zedong's wise strategic thinking encircled the city with rural areas, and successively established the Youth Salvation Association, the National Liberation Vanguard, the Peasant Rescue Association, the Women's Rescue Association, and the Children's Corps, and launched a series of national anti-Japanese strategies and tactics such as tunnel warfare and landmine warfare. It is the key to victory with Japan. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito of Japan broadcast to the whole of Japan, accepting the Potsdam Proclamation, implementing unconditional surrender, and ending the war. The signing of the Japanese surrender letter marked the complete end of the Second World War. From April 21 to 26, 1949, millions of the Chinese People's Liberation Army crossed the Yangtze River. In June 1946, the internal affairs of the Kuomintang and the Communist Party launched the three major battles of Liaoning, Huaihai, and Pingjin, and the Communist Party achieved a decisive victory.
On October 1st, 1949, the founding ceremony was grandly held in Tiananmen Square in Beijing.
Mao Zedong proclaimed to the world, the people's white powers of China were founded.
The reason why the Chinese Communist Party is able to win is to go to the people and learn from the people. These are slogans, but they contain deeper meanings than slogans, representing a deep feeling and a final belief.
New China was founded, but the construction of New China is full of unknowns, and the transition from new democracy to socialism is full of challenges.
Let us get to know that's the magical land of China.
China is a country with the most abundant natural resources in the world. The forest coverage rate is less than 9%, and land desertification and salinization are becoming more and more serious. This is a severely degraded natural environment.
Only by understanding the huge resistance and predicament faced in 1949 can we truly understand the foundation of China's founding.
Only in order to understand why China is a world of greatness.
When the People's Republic of China was first founded, China had gone through hundreds of years of semi-colonial oppression and decades of war. It had almost no industry and infrastructure, 80% illiteracy rate, 20% baby survival rate, and the level of science and technology in the mid-19th century. In 1950, the gross national product value was $18 billion. $1 was 2.75 yuan, and agricultural output value accounted for 80%. China is one of the poorest countries in the world. In the early days of New China, it was still a quasi-war environment, and it was always necessary to prepare for war, prepare for famine, and serve the people. A war that shocked the world. This war was called the Korean War by the United States, and the resistance to U.S. aggression and aid Korea by China. The fiercest and most authoritative battle in this war should be the Battle of Chongjin Lake. New China has just been established and is facing international challenges. China's aid to North Korea is likely to be in the danger zone of war, but why should it still participate in the war?
Here we reproduce that unbearable war in order to remember history and not repeat it again.
Let us first understand the background of the war.
After the Korean Civil War broke out, the main forces participating in the Korean War were North Korea and South Korea. 16 countries including the United States and the United Kingdom participated in the war in accordance with UN Resolution 84. China sent volunteers to support North Korea. The Soviet Union dispatched small-scale aviation units and anti-aircraft artillery units to participate in air defense operations in the war to resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea. At 6:30 a.m. on September 15, 1950, the five-star General MacArthur, commander of the U.S. Far East Army, issued an order to cover more than 300 warships and more than 500 aircraft in the United States and Britain. A total of 75,000 people landed on the northern part of Wolmedo Island in Incheon. The Battle of Incheon turned the tide of the battle. In one fell swoop the North Korean troops suffered from the enemy's back, and the U.S. and South Korean troops began a major counterattack on September 25, 1950. The U.S. Army recovered Seoul.
The U.S. Army crossed the Dodiae line.
General MacArthur said at the time that we would spend Christmas in the Yalu River.
We cannot send the troops.
No one believes that China's participation in the war will change anything, and no one has considered that China will win.
No one pays attention to the poor people who have clouded out of the revealing.
On October 19, 1950, the Chinese People's Volunteers entered North Korea to participate in the war. The Korean War began in an all-round way. According to the records of both the Volunteer Army and the United Nations Army, and the records of the British battlefield intelligence officers, North Korea suffered a once-in-50-year extreme cold weather in the winter of 1950 to 1951. The west coast near the Yellow Sea was particularly cold, with sudden temperatures at night. The lowest temperature in the Chongqing Lake area reached -40 degrees Celsius. The U.S. military's armed equipment is much better than China's, with aircraft, artillery, and tanks attacking in 3 dimensions. The logistics of the U.S. military consists of eiderdowns, leather hats, warm socks, warm shoes, tents, and people who dare to light a fire. They eat biscuits, cans, sausages, and turkey. The Chinese volunteers wear ordinary rubber shoes, a thinly clothed army, without the support of aircraft and artillery, holding only the simplest weapons in their hands, enduring the cold and hunger, and fighting in the extreme cold. Without air dominance and artillery cover, the rifles are frozen. Unable to pull the bolt, the whole body was frozen to ice, and under the indiscriminate bombardment of the enemy, he went forward and followed, risking his death to charge. The army can only eat fried noodles frozen into ice cubes. Potatoes are frozen like a rock and are hard to gnaw. Hold them under the armpit to heat them a little bit. Even so, being able to eat potatoes is a luxury. The most admirable and moving thing is the Ice Sculpture Company, especially the 125 officers and soldiers of the company in the Huangkeling blockade. In order not to expose the target, they are dressed in single clothes, and lie on the snow-covered position at -40 degrees, keeping them at all times. The fighting stance of charging forward, in the end all froze to death, and sacrificed heroically. These ice sculptures have become everlasting memories of history. On July 10, 1951, the warring parties began armistice negotiations. After 2 years of negotiations, on July 27, 1953, the armistice agreement was finally reached.
Days unprecedented the war followed, which to its original port, North Korea or North Korea, South Korea or South Korea.
On July 7, 1950, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 84, sending the United Nations Army to support South Korea in resisting North Korea's offensive, which eventually evolved dramatically.
The U.S. Congressional Research Service announced on July 29, 2020, the number of casualties in the major U.S. war. The number of U.S. military deaths in the Korean War was 36,574, and the casualties were 103,284. The Chinese documentary 4 Piece shows the number of casualties in the Korean War, 197,653.
The Korean War was originally a civil war between South Korea and North Korea. When the United Nations Resolution 84 entered the war, was there a dislocation of position? Was there a strategic error? Let history judge.
请拿按你的引来的时代的发的卡斯里，如果我的可能样偏是哪儿？
War is cruel. War is life and death duel at the cost of countless young lives, at the cost of the national economy. Lost life, regressed the economy, and a violation of human nature. War is a natural enemy that takes away power of life and survival, and that every country is worthy of vigilance. As of October 23, 2021, the People's Republic of China currently has 288 effective laws, including laws to be effective, including 1 constitutional, 49 constitutional related laws, 23 civil laws and commercial law, 96 administrative laws, 80 economic laws, 27 social laws, 1 criminal law, 11 litigation and non-procedural laws. As one of the most populous countries in the world, China has become one of the most secure countries in the world.
Also, one of the most efficient country in terms of legislation, just and the now enforcement. How is China capable, independent, developing, and growing?
How did China build a large, run-in country into a prosperous, powerful nation for the first time?
From June 1950 to the end of 1952, about 300 million landless peasants across the country obtained about 700 million acres of land free of charge, which completely eliminated the landowner-class land ownership system that had lasted for thousands of years in China, and the farmer had his land became a reality. At that time, people's livelihood required money, construction required money, and war required money. China was in a difficult situation. Socialist construction has enabled hundreds of millions of people to take up jobs, liberated women, promoted a large number of cadres from workers and peasants, and truly allowed the people to be the masters of their own affairs. In 1953, China began to implement the first 5-year plan to develop its national economy. Taking a big step forward on the road of industrialization is a goal that the Chinese people have dreamed of for centuries. It is the key to changing China's backwardness and becoming prosperous. In 1952, the first by-steam locomotive made in New China was put into use. In 1953, the first-generation gasoline engine was successfully developed to fill the domestic gap. In 1954, the first aircraft made in New China successfully flew in Nanchang. 1956, the first batch of domestically produced Jiefang trucks rolled off the assembly line, ending China's history of not being able to manufacture cars in batches. Basic industries that were not available in the past were established one by one, and a large number of industrial and mining enterprises were set up. In September 1958, Wuhan Iron and Steel's No. 1 blast furnace was put into production. The iron ingot cast from the first furnace of molten iron condensed a history of forge ahead from the ruins, and witnessed the glory of the Republic's steel industry from scratch and from weak to strong. 1958. The People's Commune mobilized the enthusiasm of farmers and promoted the recovery and development of agriculture, which played a positive role. In 1960, China decided to become its own sovereign country, calling for hard work, three-line construction, and the beginning of the era of national dedication. The Hangzhou-Qiantang River Bridge was completed, and Chinese talents had the first road-rail bridge designed and built by China. Completion of the Wuhan-Yangtze River Bridge truly opened the large span of independent construction by the Chinese. The world's largest high-speed rail network is now fully connected to the country. In 1966, Mao Zedong launched the Cultural Revolution, and called for grasping the revolution and promoting production. Food production maintained a relatively stable growth, and a number of important achievements were made in industrial transportation infrastructure and science and technology. The breaking of the four olds and political criticism of the Cultural Revolution also caused extremely disastrous damage to the social, economic, cultural, democratic, and legal systems. In October 1971, the People's Republic of China replaced the Republic of China in obtaining the Chinese seat in the United Nations, and became a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. U.S. President Nixon's visit to China in 1972 was the most important step in the normalization of Sino-U.S. diplomatic relations, and a week that changed the world. In 1979, the United States denounced the severance of diplomatic relations with the Republic of China, and instead recognized the People's Republic of China. In 1992, the People's Republic of China transformed from a planned economy to a socialist market economy with Chinese characteristics, and the market economy environment became increasingly open.
In 1997, Hong Kong returned to China, and the Hong Kong Special Administration Region was established under one country, two systems. The Hong Kong National Security Law was enacted on June 30th, 2020.
In 1999, McCall matured and the McCall spectrum, and many short-lived wager was at dampened at the same time.
In 2001, the People's Republic of China joined the World Trade Organization. In 2017, Beijing hosted the first Belt and Road International Cooperation Summit Forum. The Belt and Road is rooted in history, facing the future, originating in China, and benefiting mankind.
Earth-shaking changes have taken place in various fields in China.
According to the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the number of countries that have established diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China has reached 181. Urban construction is in the process of the largest urbanization today. China has 6 megacities with a permanent population of over 10 million, 10 megacities with over 5 million, and 77 large cities with over 1 million. They will most likely represent China participates in the race for future world urban civilization. The emerging industry of China's people's livelihood Internet mobile communications with a short research and development cycle has helped to establish the first industrial civilization on the blue planet with a population of 1 billion on the land of China. From small bridges and flowing water to cross-sea bridges. From country roads to wide roads with 8 verticals and 8 horizontals. From small sailing boats to large yachts, railways leading to tunnels. From steam engine trains to suspended trains, from the era without tractors to passengers taking airplanes. And trucks, cars, buses, taxis, ambulances, agricultural machinery, etc. China sports from kicking keys, rolling hoops, throwing sandbags, to martial arts, Shaolin Kung Fu, to campus radio gymnastics, to square dances for young and old, to winning diplomacy in table tennis, to winning consecutive championships in women's volleyball, to hosting the 29th Olympic 2008 at the Olympic Games and the 2022 Beijing Winter Games. The whole people will be healthy, and we will move towards the future together. There are 744 large-scale reservoirs, 3,978 medium-sized reservoirs, and 93,390 small-scale reservoirs. The common people's daily life ranges from artificially picking water from ponds, wells, and rivers to tap water, purified water, and mineral water. From kerosene lamps to diesel power generation, thermal power generation, wind power generation, and then to the world's unique UHV power grid, they all write that China is winning step by step. Made in China, from small commodities, pots and pans to automobiles, trains, airplanes, household appliances, electronic equipment, software chips, industrial heavy equipment, etc. The scale ranks first in the world, with complete categories and complete systems. In China, economic and social development occupies an important position. However, the quality of China needs to be further improved. Made in China needs to be transformed into created in China, and Chinese brands need to be upgraded to world brands. A catastrophe that shocked the world. The Wenchuan earthquake on May 12 was the most destructive and extensive earthquake in the history of New China. The worst-hit area exceeded 100,000 square kilometers, and the number of people directly affected by the disaster reached 10 million. In the 21st minutes after the earthquake, the 4 helicopters sent by the Chengdu military region to check the disaster have taken off. The country has launched an emergency mobilization, and hundreds of thousands of rescue troops have been rescuing lives from the rubble nonstop. If one party is in trouble, all parties support. Fixed and mobile blood donation stations in many cities across the country continued to work. The plane loaded with fresh blood pierced the night sky and flew directly to Chengdu. In 2003, all people were united in the fight against the SARS epidemic, and Chinese medicine played a very good role in prevention and control. Since the end of 2019, the global COVID-19 epidemic has broken out, and China has the best prevention and control measures. When the epidemic came and many countries were still protesting against wearing masks and striving for freedom without masks, China's treatment before disease epidemic prevention concept has long been used throughout the country, and almost all the people wear masks. When the epidemic came and many countries were unprepared and decided to give up part of their lives, the advantages of China's socialist system of upper and lower vertical leadership, in one call, the whole people responded, and the construction of 2 square cabin hospitals in 10 days saved lives. The Chinese government did not hesitate to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to save the life of a patient. China's control of the epidemic has once again won the hearts of the people, pushing the cohesion of the nation to a new level, fully demonstrating the superiority of China's administrative system. In 2020, starting from the second quarter, China's economy will grow inversely. The Tianwen-1 Mars probe landed on Mars, the Tiantong-1 satellite mobile communications, the Chang'e 5 moon borrowing, the Beta satellite navigation global network, China's Shenzhou 12 and 13 manned spacecraft, the Beta satellite navigation system, Galaxy Kylin operating system, etc. Over the past century, China has gone from millet-plus rifles, crude earth mines, and grenades to 2 bombs and 1 satellite, intercontinental missiles, nuclear submarines, and medium-range missiles to military fighter jets, destroyers, bombers, assault aircraft, reconnaissance aircraft, transport aircraft, early warning aircraft, etc. Cruise missile. China's reform and opening up is derived from the inheritance of Sino-US diplomatic strategies in the Mao Zedong era. On April 10, 1971, China promoted the ping-pong diplomacy between China and the United States, which opened the door to friendship between the Chinese and American peoples, like a new reform and opening up. The idea is born. The visit of U.S. President Nixon to China in June 1972 led to the normalization of relations between the two countries and marked the beginning of reform and opening up. On December 16, 1978, the People's Republic of China issued the communiqué on the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the United States and the government of the United States of America, announcing the establishment of diplomatic relations on January 1, 1979. Up, the face of China has undergone earth-shaking changes. The affluent class continues to expand and the standard of living is greatly improved. It has almost completed the path of several hundred years in the West. China quickly entered the world's second-largest economy ahead of schedule. This is the largest matrix result of reform and opening up. It is undeniable that the rapid development of the economy exposed social ills, and for a while it was almost deformed. Many official reasons for serving the people deteriorated to becoming an official, whether it is a high or a small official, first give gifts, and then do things. Many hospitals and clinics give gifts first and then treat. The social atmosphere has formed a clause without documents, give gifts first and then do things. The relationship is more than the law. Many local governments colluded with real estate developers, and the demolition did not follow legal procedures. Joined hands with real estate speculators to control the market, which has kept housing prices rising, and a generation of young people have generally become house slaves and car slaves in disguise. Corrupt officials are even more blatant and insatiable. The amount of corruption and bribery can be as many as hundreds of millions upon investigation. The luxury houses are full of golden armor, and the cash is even piled up with damp and mold. Social wealth and ugliness are endless, and corruption has spread throughout the country. The public property created by striving to be strong was turned into striving to make money by the black claw, and public ownership became private in an instant. Workers are laid off and unemployed, farmers go to cities to work, most of the farmland is deserted, and only young and old are left behind. Almost every Chinese has begun to be desperate by economic efficiency. Most literati, scholars, scientists, etc., are not adapted to the arrival of this economic efficiency, because they may study a topic throughout their lives, and get a salary. After 2012 were also uncomfortable with the arrival of fairness for a while, because they used all means to embezzle, and accept bribes, and have to return the money to the people. The Chinese government has spent several years vigorously fighting corruption. Corrupt officials have been dismissed. It is useless to flee abroad. After 20 years of fleeing, they were arrested and returned to China. The Chinese government made a clear voice: put power in a cage. In the process of social development, contradictions will always exist at different stages. Common prosperity is the other side of the people's desire to fight the world and create wealth. Urumqi Grand Bazaar, once a sensitive location for terrorist attacks, has now become a must-visit scenic spot for mainland tourists. On June 30, 2020, China promulgated the law of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China on the maintenance of national security. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said at the press conference, "National security is the basic prerequisite for the country's survival and development." In China, with the improvement of people's living standards, criminal acts such as petty theft have gradually decreased, and the security layout has electronic surveillance in every corner, and criminals cannot escape the law. First, the revolution of 1911 overthrew the autocratic monarchy that has ruled China for thousands of years, marking the beginning of the modern national democratic revolution in China. Second, the May 4th movement was an epoch-making event in the history of the modern Chinese Revolution, marking the great beginning of the new democratic revolution. Third, the establishment of the Communist Party of China fully demonstrated the pioneering spirit of pioneering the world and daring to be the first. It is the spiritual source, spiritual foundation, and spiritual foundation of the Chinese Revolution and socialist construction. Without the Communist Party, there would be no new China. Fourth, the founding of the People's Republic of China realized the new democratic revolution of national independence and people's liberation, completely ended the history of the semi-colonial and semi-feudal society of the old China, completely ended the fragmentation of the old China, completely abolished the unequal treaties, and realized China from thousands of years of feudal autocracy to a new situation of people's democracy. Fifth, the transition from the new democratic revolution to socialism, and the realization of socialism with Chinese characteristics have greatly changed the world political structure.
The democratic revolution in more the China is part of the poorly children world revolution.
The Communist Party of China has realized the transition from new democracy to socialism, and on this basis it has begun the arduous exploration of the road to socialistic construction, starting from the feudal monarch system. The system of the National People's Congress in New China has realized that people as masters of the country in a real sense, thus developing socialism with Chinese characteristics.
China is now strong, still there is not sky dominance, and it is half of many countries.
History has proved that the hard core of China's great changes, unseen in a century, is that there is a Communist Party ruling all for the people.
Hence there are also parties in China. Only socialists call China, and only socialism call develop China.
This is a witness of history.